Welcome to Neoclassicism. As a group, we will be sharing artists and architecture throughout the neoclassical era from several different countries around the world.
Benjamin West became known as one of the most acclaimed artists of his day. He moved from Philadelphia to Italy to further his art career. West never moved back to his homeland, however, he played a big part in neoclassical art. On his way back to America, he had a pit stop in London where he found much success in his art. He decided to stay there and became a charter member of the Royal Academy. His art became so well known that he would soon be painting for King George III. One of the most famous paintings is The Death of General Wolfe. This painting is important as it depicts people wearing contemporary clothing rather than classical clothing. As Mr. West explains, it must exhibit the event in a way to excite awe and veneration, and that which may be required to give superior interest to the representation must be introduced. All that can show the importance of the hero. The hero in this case is General Wolfe in the red. John Singleton Copley was an artist in colonial America where he virtually taught himself painting. He was mostly known for his portraits. He migrated to London and joined the Royal Academy of Art. His subject of portraits were his Boston sitters. His art demonstrated, as they say, genius for his surface textures and the emotional intensity it provokes. His style is more intimate and conveys a powerful sense of physical entity and directness. In this painting of Paul Revere to the left, you can see the style he portrays. It's mostly inspired by the Rococo, but it also has the darkness of the Baroque. However, this is neoclassical art, and from this, there are somber colors on his uniform. On his right is one of Copley's portraits of his sitter. As you can see, she has an awkward form looking unnatural to us. This is because Copley lacked formal training, but if you look at her clothes, there's amazing colors, amazing details, and very structured textures. This is Gilbert Stuart, an American painter who grew up in Newport, Rhode Island. He is known for being the nation's leading portrait painters. Critics praised his brushwork, his luminous colors, and the psychological penetration his portraits portrayed. He has over 1,000 portraits, but his most famous would be this painting of George Washington. Stuart was recognized for his lifelike representations that he created with brushstrokes that rarely blend the colors, giving his portraits a recently completed quality. This portrait of George Washington was so popular that it was copied in reverse onto the $1 bill. It's not completely identical, but it's very similar.
With the chaos of France during the late 18th century, a revolution ensued. The overthrowing of King Louis XVI, violence in the streets, and new constitutions being revised all were factors that dictated the lives of the French, as well as artists and their creations. This new age in art, spanning from the 18th and 19th century, is also known as Neoclassicism, which in form rejects the styles and fantasy of the Rococo and ushers in the reality of the times. Jacques-Louis David was an artist that defined neoclassical art in France with his paintings showing traits of nobility. In the lictors bring to Brutus the body of his sons, he paints of the Roman Lucius Junius Brutus, contemplating how to act against his sons who have rebelled against his republic and joined forces against their father. Brutus is shown pain with thought, but sure of what must be done, going against anyone who revolts against his republic, even if they are family. This painting represents neoclassical times because of its somber but noble messages inflicted upon the viewer to be honorable and make the hard choices to achieve the greater state of being. There were other forms of neoclassical art in France that reflected the mood of the country in more subtle ways, but still just as prominently. Painter Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres was known for many portrait-style paintings, especially the one we see here, the Princesse de Broglie, painted from 1851 to 1853. The woman posing, Pauline de Broglie, is delivered by Ingres in true neoclassical fashion, in the way that he focuses on her beauty and personality front and center. There are no distracting elements in the painting behind her, just her glowing gown and radiant skin. The expression on her face is often disputed among experts. Some say her expression is one of aristocratic contempt, while others say it was simply her shy personality being brought to painting. Going back to Jacques-Louis David, another famous piece of David's takes place during the height of the French Revolution, when Napoleon began to rise to power. David depicted the sense of heroism in Napoleon in this painting by his strong stance and his raised arm. His glove on one hand symbolizes that he's coming with peace, but the raised arm means something much different. The shape of Napoleon's raised fingers is supposed to mimic the shape of the mountains. It is implied that he's echoed by the landscape, which sends the message that he will soon conquer the Alps.
In addition to Christina's information regarding the French neoclassical male artists, I will talk about a French female artist by the name of Marie-Guillemine Benoit and her renowned painting called Portrait d'une Négresse, also known as Portrait of a Black Woman. The Portrait of a Black Woman was painted by Marie-Guillemine Benoit in 1800. This painting was designed according to a black slave brought back to France by Benoit's brother by marriage. Without a doubt, Benoit's sitter was a slave-turned-worker who had nothing to do with the manner in which her body was introduced. Benoit, constantly anxious and eager to pitch her work of art abilities, excitedly started the task of putting on canvas the beautiful and brilliant color that she found by contrasting dark flesh and white cloth material. Benoit showed nostalgic and admonishing depictions of women, children, and family life, which were expected of female artists. Of the considerable number of works she displayed between 1799 and 1804, the Portrait of a Black Woman was most exceedingly commended by the Salon critics.
Neoclassical architecture began in the mid-18th century. The newfound taste for neoclassicism came in light of the excesses of the Rococo. It is a style that procured the architecture of classical antiquity, the Vitruvian principles, and the fine works of Italian architect Andrea Palladio. Vitruvius was an Italian architect who believed that there were three main principles to good architecture. Durability allowed it to stand up robustly and remain in good condition. Utility allowed it to be useful and function well for the people using it. And beauty allowed it to delight others and raise their spirits. These Vitruvian principles were used throughout the neoclassical era. This specific style was characterized by grandeur of scale, simple geometric forms, Greek Doric or Roman detail, and dramatic use of columns. Thomas Jefferson envisioned Congress living in a Roman temple replica. Construction on this building began in 1793. The structure was modeled after Roman and Greek designs. The building was to guide the founders into the new republic that they were headed for. William Thornton was a late entry to Jefferson's competition for the building's design. His use of simple shapes, two rectangular wings that connected to a central dome and triangular pediment that was situated at the top, along with his use of columns in the Corinthian order, fell in line with what the neoclassical architecture movement was becoming. The structure itself reinforced its place in the new republic. Over in Russia, neoclassical architecture was also taking off. Just 7 years after ending the Patriotic War of 1812, Carlo di Giovanni Rossi was chosen to design the General Staff Building. His inspiration came from Roman and Greek architecture. This building is 580 meters long. It is bow-shaped and consists of two wings. The wings are separated by a triumphal arch and is adorned with a sculpture of the Goddess of Glory that commemorates the victory over Napoleon and his army. Throughout the building, we can see the heavy use of columns, its grand scale, and its faithful use of simple geometric shapes.
This is William Hogarth. He was an English painter, printmaker, and cartoonist, otherwise known as the grandfather of satire. His realistic and arguably caricatured depictions of his subjects are a departure from idealism and classic subjects. His rejection of idolized beauty was something new and fresh. This was a big part in the change to neoclassicism. He often ridicules the aristocracy and middle-class people of England at that time. He also includes many subtle symbols that add more to the story of his art. He puts some humor in his paintings as well by naming people funny things. In his cartoons, he included issues such as animal abuse, death, and even murder. These publications were viewed by the public and I'm sure influenced them in some way. Later on in his career, he started a school to train other artists. This is where Thomas Gainsborough comes in. One of the most famous portrait and landscape painters of the 18th century. In London, he became associated with William Hogarth and his school. Later on in Thomas's art career, commissions for his personal portraits increased. His clientele included mainly local merchants and squires.